please welcome Flavia Circiumaru.
Right, if I know how to turn the mic on. Hello? Okay, great. $8. How many of you do recognize the sound that you just heard? I bet it doesn't bring too many great memories. For every person in this room who has ever been on call, this sound might trigger a PTSD response or an inquisitive call to adventure. For me, this sound reminds me of a difficult time during the pandemic when I'd be woken up at 2 in the morning, feeling sorry for myself and my partner, who had to be reminded yet again that there are very few moments when one can enjoy life, even at night. Depending on your flashbacks, you could already get a pretty good idea whether you're gonna enjoy the next hour or not, because I'm handing in the invitation to reminisce on those late hours and hang on to those feelings and questions that those late hours were bringing into your head. Did anyone else respond to this call? Do you really need to wake up? Would anyone notice if I just turn off my phone? In those fine hours, was your head filled with despair, trying to figure out what was going on? Or was it just another chance to prove that you're the right person for the job, as you just happened to merge a request in that area last week? During those hours, I will start my nocturnal crafts, trying to bargain with this invisible power to convince it really that there is no need for me to wake up. I thought we fixed this issue last week. Are there any tests in this area? Should I pay more attention to the handover on Monday? Are there any docs on how to fix this issue? Why do we have an S3 bucket called snoring raccoons? Regardless of how many times I would fight this negotiation in my head, the inner responsibility would win, and I would get my head into the game. Don't get me wrong, I always like to get my full 8 hours of sleep, but it was particularly painful to log into our monitoring platform to realize that there are no magic monitors to lead me to the bottom of my problem. I was about 6 months in, and while my knowledge of the system improved over time, the rate at which we were growing from a business perspective made it very difficult for the average engineer to fit all that information in one person's head. The system felt unpredictable. I barely had good knowledge of certain parts of the domain areas, and the messages felt so vague that I could barely decrypt what part of the system I should look into first. To be on support as an engineer means a lot of things. But at the end of the day, it means to be that friendly neighbor that you can distract with a problem, with a technical challenge, to debug a design live in the wild, to figure out what would be the best practices to use for certain usages. It meant you were designated to get distracted, triage, and reassess what is the most important fix to look into right now. Even before I joined my company's support rota, I knew it was going to be a bumpy road, as I was witnessing my colleagues transitioning from the good old days of support, where one inquiry would come sparsely, once a day, to sprints of 4 to 5 queries a day, each negotiating a higher level of urgency. In our worst days, we would see about 3 to 4 critical changes spawning into our Slack channel, each alluding to an unpredictable scenario that we haven't considered soon enough in the preliminary phases of our design. The curse of success, as I would like to call it, meant that we had to put our different focuses on the side. We had to figure out what we want to do. So for several years, deciding to focus on our product development came with a clear conscience that our product supportability was good enough. And while we were still successful at doing our job, and it was pretty good, it hasn't always been easy. As I was reminiscing on my times at FundApps, I couldn't help but recall all those long hours of hard debugging, all those reverted merge requests, all those direct connections into client environment to assess the behavior of our service. We knew that things could have gone better, but we had to accept our practices as they were at the time with the resources and the context that we had at the time. So what I'm about to share with you are the chapters in our company's history where we had to exercise our adapting skills in the way that we do support. The context of our business is important though, as every decision is interconnected to the identity of our company. We are a business-to-business SaaS company that started as a bootstrap startup. Our revenue is our lifeline, and every single change that we had to make had been built and driven with the resources and the context that we had at the time. So while some of these stories might bring you a strong reaction, rest assured that every decision has been deliberate. In the second part of this presentation, we're going to focus on the team practices that never left us, regardless of the changes that our team topology witnessed. But before we jump into that story, I think this is the best moment as ever to share what support meant to us over the years. Our responsibilities have taken many shapes, most of which I'm sure you'll be familiar with. What it may not be as visible to you is the context of our company and the context of our work. We work in an industry of regulatory compliance where clients have to meet certain deadlines in order to meet regulatory requirements. If our service isn't reliable enough, they could miss a deadline, fail to comply, and be fined millions of pounds. But at a more casual level, to be on support represented a few things. Across the years, it meant this. We would provide technical and product context for our client services who would raise issues but for our clients. We would provide debugging techniques for our regulatory team who would in exchange be responsible to translate regulatory rules. We would ensure that our revenue team can have fail-proof demos regardless of time and day. And we would use all of this by using basic visibility techniques such as logs and metrics, which only got better through time in the shape of monitoring, observability, alerting, metadata, tracing. Lastly, we would be at the front line of our incident management zone. Your definition of an incident might be different to mine, so just for everyone's benefit, when I say incident, I mean a critical change in one or more client environments in production. And while we may not be responsible to fix the breaking change, we will ensure that the relevant teams are aware there is a problem, and if necessary, we are available to make that fix go all the way through the deployment process. Regardless of the problem, the bottom line was that support represented the interface between client services and engineering, the bridge between the design decisions that we're making and that the impact it has on our clients. Since we weren't that many to begin with, it was easy to find someone who can resolve our blockers. So for our new developers, the intention was that they would learn the new system, get accustomed to communicating with our client services, and find more creative ways of debugging or making our developer experience much better, whether that is through new tools or old tools. Fast forward to 2024, we would still keep our balance between product maintenance and product development and support maintenance. However, with more than 50 engineers, 5 product teams, and 1 internal team to keep track of everything, it is more important than ever that after 5 years or even 9 years of essentially doing the same thing, that our goals are clear, that our support goals are clear. I'm going to cover this in the second part of the presentation as well, but I think it is important to highlight what I think are the most important takeaways of this presentation. Our first goal was to ensure that other teams can get closer to product nirvana. If you had a product question that's technical, you come to support first. And if we cannot help you, we'll ensure that at least we know what team you should go to first to get an answer. Our second goal was to leave things better than they were. Something as small as improving a technical documentation with an observation that you think is useful, may save someone an hour of their time in the future. Every effort counts, and it builds towards the quality of your internal communication. Our third goal, or better said, rule, is to never assume that we're going to be a support team forever. Whoever picks our responsibilities in the future knows what tools to use because they are visible and they can steer themselves closer to an answer. You may be listening to this and wonder what's so special about this point. Shouldn't they be a given when you're setting the grounds for a new team or a new project? And what an excellent point you've been making. I do hope you think this way, and I want to talk to you after the end of this presentation because I do think you have a point. I want you for now to put that question in your back pocket. I first have a question for you. I want you first to reflect on your situation. How do you define support? What are or should be the main responsibilities of your team? What feelings do surface at the idea of being on support for a week? Actually, let's have a quick experiment and with a show of hands, tell us if you're part of the support collective in your organization. It may not be called this way. You may call yourself site reliability engineers, operations, tech support. Regardless of the name, pick someone in the group that you haven't worked with before. And I know you guys like corner cases. Just assume that they have the necessary tech stack to work in your organization. Now, leave your hand up or raise your hand up again if you think that these individuals would be able to make decent progress on your work ticket by tomorrow. Depending on whether you decided to leave your hand up or not, it might be a symptom of whether your onboarding system is of a great quality or not for your product. Perhaps the feelings more associated with that part of the organization is burnout, stress, fear of not screwing up. Perhaps you don't want to focus on this right now because what is important to you is leadership, innovation, growth, or meeting some very ambitious targets for your company. There is no correct answer. There is no perfect recipe. What has worked for us may not work for you. I'm sharing our definition because I'm proud of where we got here. This is a sign of a healthy revenue pipeline for us. All that focus on product development, on demos, on client community have been paying off, and we are finally in a position where we can set time aside to focus on how our product can reliably scale to thousands of customers without drowning in hundreds of requests a week. How can we ensure that we can keep this client base as satisfied as it was when we could have counted them on our fingers? As there is no perfect answer for you, there is no right one for us. Over the years, we have experimented in a lot of ways. Back in 2019, when I joined, we were all working from a cozy office building floor in Shoreditch. We were about 20 developers, out of which 50% were hired in the last year. And the spirits were running high. Nerf bullets and laughter were a daily occurrence, were flowing smoothly through the business meeting plans, even for those who were just starting their journey at FundApps. Since we weren't that many to begin with, and working from home wasn't something that we would casually do, everyone's work was contained within the same context. We were divided by card suits at the time as teams. We were hearts, spades, clubs, diamonds. Each would interchangeably work on all parts of the system, regardless of the skill sets required. You name it, would do it. Performance, feature enhancements, back-end, front-end. Having approximately 2 pipelines and a monolith to take care of, it was easy to pick someone from the group, and they could pretty much give you an idea of what we were doing in the department. That's why finding someone or convincing someone to be part of our support rota didn't take a lot of effort, Once a developer felt like they acquired enough knowledge to triage debug a problem, they would join what I like to call a traditional rota. A developer would stay on support for exactly 1 week, and they would go move back to more standard team roadmaps. What I found more interesting, even all the way back to 2016, was the engineering team was so small and contained that they would assign themselves to be on support for 1 day, and it would work for them. That was pretty sick. And spoiler alert, even though we are a team around support right now, this is not the first time we built a team around support. Back in 2021, we thought a handful of smart individuals would benefit from being on support for 6 weeks. Surely 6 weeks is enough to get to the bottom of our most complicated problems. Surely a team can divide the backlog between themselves and reduce it threefold in that amount of time. Easy peasy. I was there when we took that decision. In fact, I was part of the assembly that decided to give it a go, but for some reason I was not part of the performing team. I did decide, however, to facilitate the retro at the end of those 6 weeks and see how the team did and felt about it. And I did have to look at my meeting notes for this one because I still have them. And while the thing wasn't a complete fiasco, the team didn't really jump into the challenge with both feet. They stayed reactive, trying to pair on the most complicated issues. They would work on the new queries as well, and general self-organization would be better. However, one eye was still kept on their original team, anticipating that they will go back in no time. More interestingly, they wanted to make sure that the leadership opportunities, such as managing a team, leading a project, or mentoring someone, were not taken for granted. Back then, our priorities of the company were different. So after only one iteration, we decided to call off the experiment. For the people in the room who do pay attention to the numbers, and given that the audience target is engineers, I do hope there will be a few of you, you might be wondering why we decided 6 weeks to begin with. Does anyone know? Except my colleagues who have worked with me before? Does anyone work at Basecamp? For those of you who have no idea what I'm talking about, Basecamp is an organization that's known for their ways of working books. More concisely, FundApps is known for 2 of these books. One of them is Rework, legendary. In fact, our CEO, Andrew, decided to found our company after reading that book. But more relevantly, Shape Up, which is a book about product methodologies. At the time, we would use that book for our features we would build from scratch, where we wouldn't be sure if our clients would find value in the features that we built. So we would assign them 6 weeks for the first slice, free of unnecessary tangents. If the clients responded well to the work, great, we would assign them 6 more weeks. If not, well, at least we didn't waste half a year to find that out. So yeah, since at the time we were working in sprints of 6 weeks, every single team, we thought that the support team would benefit from the same synchronous cycle. In our case, our most valuable clientele were our developers, but the proof of concept didn't go that well. We draw the same conclusion that at least we didn't waste half a year to find that out. But yeah, Basecamp, great to bring features in front of our clients, not so great to keep our developers on support happy. One thing we did get out of that experiment though, we realized that people really enjoyed having a support buddy. To know that if you have a hell of a week, at least you have someone to share the responsibilities with. A person will stay on support, primary, making sure to make that resolution time nice and low. And the other person will stay as secondary. Having the context of the previous week, they will have the space to finish whatever carried over. And more importantly, they would have the space to help the person on the primary role in case shit hit the fan. Well, even in our days right now, even to these days, we are still using this budding strategy, and we would keep it. It really worked. The rotation element of our methodologies also represented a lot of things. It was, first of all, an inflection point. People can focus on different things for a while. A change of scenery, good or bad, it made you reflect on whether you enjoyed the type of work you're doing, your project, your team, or the workload you're getting. For a given week, if you enjoy the change of pace or shifting responsibilities around or understanding that product decisions are not as black as white, you can talk to your manager to make some changes to your work style. If that's not your cup of tea, no drama. You can go back to more regular work streams such as product decisions, architecture designs, and so on for a given couple of weeks, and you can forget all about it. It also represented a tool for fairness. Whether you enjoy being on support or not, at least it gave everyone exposure to all parts of the system. It also gave people a chance to exercise their autonomy and ownership skills, which was especially important if your company at points was suffering from the so infamously called hero culture. Let me give you some context. Do people know what I mean by RCAs? Root cause analyses? Those kind of meetings that you have in the aftermath of an incident when you want to surface the highest level cause of a problem. From where I was standing, our RCAs would bring this unspoken point to the table. It was an unspoken point to the table, given that if the person who had the most context over the faulty service was in the proverbial room or not. Having them online meant that we would have the intricacies of this product in someone's head, and they could steer us away from the lighthouse. If the captain didn't happen to be online or be in the room with us, it would take us significantly longer to reach a resolution. It was one of those times where we weren't aware that we were promoting a hero culture, or otherwise known, knowledge silos. Reserving individuals a spotlight to get accustomed to one part of the service that they haven't worked before, to get intimately familiar with a part of the system and get obsessed to the point that they cannot stop until they get it better. That drive and autonomy is what made us avoid relying on the same 2-3 individuals, or God forbid, one individual to get to the bottom of a problem. We work with this philosophy, good enough is better than perfect. And the feeling of understanding this imperfect system with its quirks, with its tech debt, is a privilege for the people who don't have the same natural tendencies to seek the spotlight in the organization, to work on an issue. Over time, the knowledge of the conglomerate have been slowly dissipating into every individual's head, and the rotation element of it is what made our knowledge go smoothly and evenly throughout the organization. Shifting our responsibilities from one person to another meant that finally the cracks of our foundation were filling in. So coming back to our timeline, let me give you a quick reminder of what we experimented for the first 5 years at FundApps from a product perspective. We would start with rotas as small as 1 individual a day to a whole team for 6 days. And while not everything stuck with us, we did pick up some promising ways of working, such as transitional rotas, budding strategy, or generally becoming more aware that we have the tendency to work with the same 2-3 individuals to resolve an issue. As we became more successful at doing our job and selling our product, we also got appetite for more products, more features, more risk. So fast forward to 2022, our roadmap was soaking in creative juices coming from both our most loyal customers and our subject matter experts. And in a matter of months, we will shift our focus from mastering our main product into specializing, in branching out into different specializations using brainstorming techniques and evergreen field projects. As someone who is a big fan of Alfred Adler's philosophy, I was embracing this change with the enthusiasm of a dog who spotted the owner across the room getting ready for a walk. Finally, I can be the master of a new domain. I can learn the best testing patterns, the best serverless frameworks, the best pipeline processes. It's gonna be great. All we need is time. Not everyone had the same golden retriever energy as I was exuding. And a good part of our developers decided to stick around and work on improving the performance of our main core element, the engine. Hats off to them. This attitude is what made us scale to our biggest clients that we have today. And if you want to learn more about it, you are in luck because my colleague Leah in the back has a talk on exactly this topic on YouTube that I'm sure she'll be very happy to share with you. As we were growing and diversifying our product base, understandably, not everyone could hold the entire code base context in their head. And it was unfair to assume that someone who was setting the foundations of a new service could take care of an old one in the process. So we split our responsibilities into so-called product teams, which would contain ownership of work over a particular category of work. And we would entrust that the rest of the teams would become shokunin, masters of their own design, of their own domain. The next sensible step was to remove these individuals from the support main rota, anticipating that sooner or later their services would be ready for production and they would need to take care of them themselves. So out of 40 engineers or so, 20 were set on their path to build new value for our customers. The rest stayed to improve the foundation. So with half of our developers focusing on different financial sectors, we decided that our support in the main core element of the product would benefit from specializing would divide their responsibilities into different specializations based on our skill sets, back-end, front-end, and knowledge of our main component, the engine. Which meant, if you were one of the 5 front-end developers in our collective, you would be in support every 5 weeks, which was quite a change from being on support every quarter or less, but it was not unprecedented. Bear in mind that we were pretty good at doing our job still, and we were selling our products, so our customer base was growing. And with the nature of our company, business to business, every single implementation would have a significant impact on our support demand. At the same time, as our core team was looking inward to stabilize our core element, the engine, and our front-end team was upgrading the UI, a good proportion of our clients were growing impatient over the slow progress of our feature enhancements, even though we're still doing them. But much harder to admit, they would recognize a significant amount of bugs on the critical parts of our system. During that time, our CTO had joined more client calls than he would ever care to admit. So let's take a step back and assess where we are. Our engineering team not only split in half, but our main rota also split into subcategories, and now people are expected to be on support every 4 to 5 weeks, while also reworking our main component and working on front-end projects and taking care of feature enhancements and also taking care of our most concerned clients. It doesn't take an expert to notice that all of these decisions at once were risky, but we thought it is the best bet we have with the resources and the context that we have at the time. My colleagues reluctantly accepted the challenge and accepted the plans, but they knew what was coming was not going to be easy. As the business ambitions grew even higher, to report back every month our monthly wins to the organization, having people pulled out a quarter of that time to handle stress-inducing client calls was, to put it lightly, demanding. The signs of such a frequent context switch grew more and more visible. Tickets were being picked up but left untracked for weeks. Handovers would be frequently insufficient. knowing that the previous people would decide to linger on support for a couple more days instead of going back to the task assigned in their original team. Documentation was often desired, but often overlooked in favor of rejoining one's team. A lot of non-functional items were left out every week because the teams could not spare an individual more than 5 days in a row. On top of that, people unsurprisingly needed to take breaks, go on holiday, take part in the hiring process, offer peer feedback, to use their learning days, and even manage a few people. All of these elements that make our company so great could not be stopped just because the workload demanded it. So everyone dropped the weight they thought they could. A piece of documentation here, a ticket untracked here, an ambitious automation left on a ghosted branch over there. I wish I could tell you that the impact was as isolated as it seems. That would be a lie. During that period, our incident rate raised significantly, and it was clear we were not debugging our own thinking. We would not take the necessary steps to put some safeguards in place or use rollback plans. We would not consider the changes, the risks associated with the changes that would go to production. What began like an innocent oversight snowballed into a tiring series of incident reports, which would only push our roadmap back forwards into the future. It became obvious that we had to change our attitude towards delivery. And instead of looking at our horizon or our knowledge more broadly, we had to take things more slowly, look deeper into our assumptions, and look beyond the existing suite of tests. So after careful consideration, our engineering managers took a leap of faith and asked across the department who would be willing to be part of a team who would take care of our main core product. This team would act as a main coordinator. It would ensure that our client requests, regardless of their call to action, would be responded in due course. And more importantly, over time, it would shift their focus from the reactive nature, as it is, to proactively reducing our most repetitive chores and manual interventions. And so the Powerpuff Girls team took birth. We have been working in this formation for the past 6 months, and while it hasn't always been easy, it's been proving to be the best solution to our problems. However, the quality of a company's support isn't the result of a secret incantation with the right number of people at the right time for a given time. It is not down to having your backlog empty or have you as an expert in your domain. Your experience maintaining a mature product is the result of the practices that you use to identify and debug some issues. So, with so much time to reflect on our goals and lessons learned from the past, finally, we reconsolidated the fundamental practices that make our engineering macro system efficient. So for the remaining of this talk, I'm going to talk to you about them. I'm going to brush over them in the hope that they inspire your next initiative at work. I won't be calling out on anyone, but for the sake of keeping things tidy and intuitive, I decided to divide these practices by layers, by levels. We would be calling them reactive, adaptive, and proactive. But please bear in mind that these levels are mere guidelines. Not every component of your product needs to reach proactive levels in order to feel like you're sustaining the maintainability of the product. And even more so, you don't have to tick every single underlying box to consider yourself at that level. The purpose of this classification is to make you identify potential blind spots and assumptions in the way that you do work in your team. So let me start off with a meta practice, team objectives. When we started as a team, our top priority was to get a handle of unclient requests. No matter how big and small they were, we would assess on the spot, triage, and learn on the spot what is the most sensible way to reach a resolution. For an entire month, we were operating that way, and let me tell you, it felt chaotic. Not only because we couldn't really tell the progress to the rest of the department, but we could almost see the burnout entering the room, not even bothering to put their coat on a hanger. Since we didn't make decisions for ourselves, the organization also felt at home to make these decisions for us, to interpret what we should do. So for a good couple of weeks, we would go through these negotiations with senior leadership to assess what our priorities should be. I would advise anyone to stay at this level as little as possible to avoid difficult conversations. Setting up team objectives may feel bland, soulless, corporate, especially if you align them with quantifiable metrics such as lead time, resolution time, or numbers of tickets resolved in a month. However, back in our first month, where we'd be so drowned in requests that we could barely figure out what our purpose is, these team objectives gave us a layer of reassurance that the tickets that we are solving, as disparate as they may look like, they were pieces of a puzzle that were completing our big picture. More than that, by having a mission set for ourselves meant that the others could not debase our intentions. Having faced many different issues, we now have an educated understanding of the patterns that we come across now and again, and we can spend deliberate sessions brainstorming and analyzing how we can improve our goals and metrics in alignment with how our business would best thrive. It is these conclusions, these practices, these objectives that surface most of the practices that I'm going to talk to you today. And if any of them are bringing a twinkle into your eye, use today's opportunity to share how you're proving them at work. Let's start with the first one, a mindset of moderation. We are not here to work the hardest. We are not here to prove that we are constantly online or irreplaceable. We are here to set the standards of a great quality service where eventually every single anomaly is traceable to a cause with as little human intervention as possible. We are here for a good time, not a long time. So as you begin your journey of only keeping things that bring you joy, you want to take your environment as it is. You want to ask the rest of the team and the stakeholders, how do they understand the system and how does it compare to your own assumptions about it? What are the most critical parts of your system? Do they know how to fail visibly and loudly? Are they covered by the right type of tests? Maybe take a few more steps back. Are you familiar enough with the product you're trying to defend? Do you know what are the most common user paths in your web application? If a user reports a bug several times, have you acquired enough experience to assess whether you should have a turn in the road or figure it out later? Focus less on offering an opinion at this point and listen to the citizens of your city. Engage your active listening. Ways in which you might try to do that is by seeking training sessions from subject matter experts on explaining the most critical parts of your system. Document unfamiliar areas of the service, even if it turns out that someone has done the same thing as you 6 months ago. Explore unknown parts of the system with your team. Organize team days in which you look into them, judgment-free. Lastly, organize cross-team check-ins regularly with the other teams in your department who are sharing the same code base as you. Chances are they will have pretty good ideas on how they can improve the maintainability of your product, but they never had the space as you to improve it. Prove to them you are there to make their wishes come true. So if you engage in this type of knowledge transfer sessions, chances are you have assimilated a lot of insight and pain from the other teams before your time. Also, by now, you have picked up a few areas of your product that you understand from a technical and domain perspective, And you have a few ideas on how to reduce the investigation time and put those solutions in such an obvious, place your solutions in such an obvious manner that anyone can figure out what to do in your absence. So ways in which you might consider doing this is by writing self-guiding documentation next to the most common error messages. Write operational runbooks for repetitive chores. Build monitoring tools in which you can surface the most common questions that you get on support. Lastly, reduce blind spots with 1% improvements, whether that is writing very intentional tests or writing creative playbooks. As you have been exposed to the most of the layers of the product at this point, you have the space to brainstorm ways in which you can recover from scenarios that haven't happened yet. Or more interestingly, you can think of an escape plan. Can you completely eliminate yourselves and others from the equation? Build safe solutions that can auto-recover from failure. Self-impose standards for new components of your system, not to reduce their autonomy, but to give them a better lifeline in the new environment. Facilitate workshops in which relevant teams can learn how to find the answers to the most common questions that they find themselves having again and again. Find ways in which you can onboard someone with as little time as possible so that the period of adjustment is kept to a minimum and the individual can feel like they can build on top of the tools that you already have. Practice number 2, over-collaborate and over-communicate. Don't let anyone doubt what are your intentions and your goal, whether that is the progress of your goal in particular or the progress of a simple ticket. A visible developer in a visible team brings reassurance to the department and the company of the directions you're heading. And as an internal team, it may not be as easy and natural to you to be as loud as the rest of the service teams or product teams. But if the quality of your workload, if the nature of your workload is unpredictable as it seems, to not follow a roadmap, it is imperative to share your highlights loudly. In the incipient stages of your cross-team collaboration, you do let these problems come to you. You are available to answer support queries that are coming to you depending on different levels of urgency set by them. You are available to help others unblock common tools of delivery, whether that is deployment pipelines, bugs escaped into production, or misconfigurations of a system. And lastly, while it may not seem as reactive, it is safe to assume that the business will need to know your intentions and your achievements for the rest of the month, or for the past month. Just because your manager knows what you are doing, it doesn't mean that the rest of the department knows. So use your channels of communication to tell the rest of the department what are your main focuses for the given month. For us, at the end of every month, we will share our team achievements in alignment with our business values, and a soft promise that we will look into particular issues, but we have the natural caveat that things are subject to change. By now, you can make a pretty better distinction between urgent matters and postponable investigations, and use that knowledge to create processes for self-remediation. You take part in cross-team conversations to ensure that practices that led to a problem are shared in a transparent way. You promote a culture of risk assessment and ensure rollback plans are in place for features that are going to be delivered onwards. You can classify now the type of requests that are coming in into high-level themes, and you can communicate them further into the department. When it comes to taking your collaboration to a whole new level, I did find that looking at the engineering conglomerate from a social, technical, theory perspective really highlights emphasizes the interrelatedness of subcomponents to the entirety of the organization and the connection of the organization with the environment it operates in. It brings light to the fact that in order to improve and build on top of a component, you do need input from all other components of the system. So ways in which you might realize that is by the fact that the velocity of a delivery without breaking changes is a sign of great observability. You learn that, you anticipate that what you learn from one team would be useful to share with the rest of the department as well. Likely, some of the decisions made even at this point may not be as easily communicated and broadcasted to every single engineer. So there is a risk that some of our standards will slip through the cracks. And it would make every independent decision that don't align, we will likely get to a point where independent decisions will not align with the consensus once reached. So for the better cases, we would probably catch this problem early on and we would correct each other. In our worst cases, we would realize that an entire solution time was wasted. So for those unfortunate events, it is recommended that we would have our big decisions placed in a very public space where we can record these big decisions, and it will make everyone avoid in their mind whether they should use the set standards or at least have an educated understanding of where to go in order to question them. Practice number 3, conduct your orchestra. As you grow into your role of overseeing, you become more aware of your power to conduct others into a better harmony. Common concerns and problems are becoming more obvious, and you are there to enable those channels of communication. So you intervene only when a problem is escalated. You work with the observability you have in place, and you follow the docs and the tests that are in place. But once you feel more comfortable on your podium, you seek to validate whether your orchestra can make safe changes without breaking changes, without your immediate intervention. You make it more visible when breaking changes enter the system, and you share with others preventative measures. Ultimately, the more the service is self-adjustable, the better. So, after several months of answering similar product questions, you're likely going to have a good idea what parts of the system could use from an improvement or not. And you are in a position where you can consolidate how can the product development find opportunities for ways in which we can improve the user experience, find new revenue streams, or get rid of forgotten functionality. Lastly, you can confidently recognize when there are knowledge gaps in your department and feel empowered to raise the challenges in blameless environments for the benefit of the entire business. The practices that you take on board might bring you anecdotal benefits, might even bring you the glory of some newly set standards in your organization. However, these 5 minutes of fame are only as good as the next shiny initiative at work. The only way to confirm that these practices are beneficial to the business is by aligning them back to your team objectives. Just like in every anxiety-inducing situation, you are remembered to focus on your breathing. Dealing with the chaotic nature of support, you have to realign your thinking to the team objectives axis that you have initially built. We are used to considering support load a very low-level, granular work filled with temporary annoyances, distracting us from what is really important, the roadmap. But I do hope that this story will shed a different light on how maintaining a core product can be a very interesting, complicated art form in which different problems share common behavioral patterns and ways that haven't been questioned in a very long time. If I can close up the story with one piece of advice, it would be this. Your ultimate goal when maintaining a mature product isn't to have impenetrable monitoring, self-writing documentation, or telepathic communication. Although I must admit, they all sound pretty nice. The priorities of the business will inevitably change, and it is the friends you make along the way and the lessons that you learned that will make it seem worth it. The true aim isn't just to create a mature product, but to instill the quality standards to the future generations of developers who will eventually take your baton. It is the manifesto you leave behind that should inspire new developers to race against the status quo, seek innovation and scalable solutions through their quotidian tasks. As cliché as it might sound, you have the power to transform your legacy in an endless pursuit of operational excellence. Thank you.